News 5 begins now with breaking news.
You have been watching, along with the nation, live coverage of the verdict being reached in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
After 10 and a half hours of deliberations, a jury found him guilty on all charges, including murder in the death of George Floyd.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty.
Floyd died after Chauvin pinned him to the ground with a knee on his neck for more than 9 minutes during an arrest.
Chauvin is now back in police custody. His bail revoked after the guilty verdict was read, and he could face decades behind bars when he is sentenced in about 8 weeks.
Okay, we want to take a live look now at George Floyd Square in Minneapolis tonight. This is where hundreds gathered to be there as the verdict was read earlier today. Guilty! And that is the video of the cheers that rang out in George Floyd Square as the verdict was read earlier today.
And we know that the Cleveland branch of the NAACP has been watching this case very closely. Let's go to the local chapter president, Danielle Sidnor, for reaction. Danielle, thank you for being with us. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right, Danielle, we want to ask you, what was your reaction to this verdict? Because it seemed like the whole country was waiting with bated breath for this verdict to come down today.
You know, we were absolutely waiting with bated breath. I think that there were so many of us who did not know whether or not we would have justice, this menial amount of justice, because the only justice would have been the fact that George Floyd would still be alive today. But at minimum now, we see that law enforcement should take notice that they can and will be held accountable when they use violence, especially against the Black community.
So tell me, what implications do you think this will have on future cases? So you just kind of hinted at that. So we have a police officer now charged with murder, found or convicted of murder, I should say, at this point. What do you think that means for future cases, particularly when we talk about the death of Black people? It looks like we
believe that it is an example of a new precedents.
Go ahead, Danielle. Sorry, we froze for a minute.
No problem. I said this is an example of hopefully precedents that can be set, that prosecutors recognize that if they do the work, they can bring justice to families and communities. So many times we hear how hard it is for them to find enough evidence to take these cases to trial. But we believe in this situation, what it demonstrates is, again, prosecutors that are willing to do the work can bring justice for families like George Floyd and others that have cases that will be going before the courts in the near future.
And Danielle, many people are hoping that this will help turn the tide. Many people talking about police reform at this point. What are the hopes what is the NAACP hoping at this point?
We hope that the same energy that took people out into the streets to protest this past summer does not stop. We have not received total systematic change and systematic justice. We look at the amount of police presence in the National Guard and all these things that were brought into this community, considering that there could have been a different outcome. But yet we find it so hard for those same levels of government to invest in our neighborhoods, invest in our communities, to ensure that young people have places to go after school, to ensure that people get equal access to healthcare. So justice is not just about this specific trial. It's about changing systems that cause Black people to be in conditions where violence and negativity is just so prevalent in our neighborhoods.
Danielle Sidnor, the president of the local chapter of the NAACP, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
And we continue to get reaction to this verdict from people in Northeast Ohio. Black Lives Matter's Cleveland is gathering right now downtown. We can take you there live right now as well. News 5 investigator Joe Paganakis on the scene. All right, Joe, what are people saying right now downtown?
Well, Rob, there's a sense of relief for sure, but everyone I talk to say that basically this doesn't really mean anything just yet, that it's great that this verdict came down the way it did, but there's a lot more that still needs to happen. You can see here, Public Square, about 50 people gathering thus far, extremely peaceful, very reflective. Many people quietly celebrating here, but again, many feeling that much more needs to be done. And Kareem Hinton is with me right now. He's one of the founders of Black Lives Matter Cleveland. Your feelings about this verdict that was announced just about an hour ago?
So, you know, I'm still apprehensive because we don't have, sentencing yet. We know what judges can do and have done in the past. So I'm still a little bit concerned and apprehensive, but I'm glad that the guilty verdict came. And I have to, and we all have to acknowledge why that guilty verdict came, why we're in a place that we are not normally. And that's because people decided to stop and try to intervene in George Floyd's murder. We had folks that stopped and they decided to video. And we had people that took to the streets nationwide. And because of that attention, raising up that particular incident, because of the fact that we had clear, concise video of what happened from different angles, because people showed up on these streets, we have the verdict that we have. And all those things that I just mentioned are the very things that we have members of the Republican Party down in the State House. They're trying to stop us from being able to do those things. They don't want us to video law enforcement. They don't want us to show up on the streets. And you could also get an extra charge for actually stopping when an incident is happening. So we have to acknowledge why we're here and why it is that they're against that stuff, because they don't want outcomes like this, I feel.
Kareem Hinton, Black Lives Matter Cleveland, thank you very much. You can see that the program is starting right now here. A solemn moment here is prayer. Just get started.
There we go.
So you can see the reaction here in downtown Cleveland, about 50 people gathering thus far, more people starting to collect right here on Public Square, Rob.
All right, Joe, thank you. Let us know what's going on. Stay on this. Let us know when we need to get back to you. Thank you very much. Now, a short time ago, the city of Cleveland released this statement offering support to George Floyd's family, then addressing its own past problems with policing, saying since the consent decree, it's made strides, sure, but recognizes additional growth is needed as well.
Also, if you had an appointment at the mass vaccination clinic at the Wolstein Center, you will have to reschedule. The clinic has been closed for the evening due to this verdict being read. Now, the Ohio National Guard tweeted around 5:30 this evening that those impacted will be contacted to reschedule. They expect normal operations to resume tomorrow.
Now, we know people across the country were glued to their televisions when this verdict was read. That included local establishments, too, like the Academy Tavern, where this guilty verdict was welcome news. Now, we did speak with a couple customers who watched that verdict come in about whether they were nervous, how it felt to hear that Chauvin had actually been convicted.
Justice is served. What was done was wrong. The whole world saw. But the truth is going to be shown to the world. So this was necessary.
Even with the world we're at right now, you never know what's going to happen. So, but I'm glad that it's happening the way it is, and it's that we're at that point of we're not going to stop fighting for what we believe that.
Both of those viewers agreeing today that justice was indeed served.
And before we leave for break, we want to leave you with the sights and sounds from around the country as the guilty verdict of former officer Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd was read just a little while ago.